The message came on a cold Tuesday morning in January. It bounced off 17 satellites before reaching the desk of Secretary General Maria Santos. She read it 3 times before believing it was real. Earth had been detected by alien life. The Galactic Council of 12 Civilizations was inviting humanity to present itself before their assembly. The world changed that day. Every government, every nation, every person on Earth learned that they were not alone in the universe. Some people celebrated. Some people panicked. But the leaders of Earth knew they had to respond. Commander Daniel Harris was chosen to lead the diplomatic mission. He was 53 years old, with gray streaks in his dark hair and tired lines around his eyes. He had spent 30 years in the Navy and another 5 years working as a negotiator for the United Nations. He was known for his patience, his calm voice, and his ability to stay steady when everyone else was falling apart. His second in command was Lieutenant Commander Sophie Grant. She was younger, sharper, and handled all the technical details that Daniel found boring. Their xenolinguist was Dr. Kevin Moore, a quiet man who had spent the last 6 months learning the common galactic trade language from the data packets the Council had sent. Their ship was called the Starbound Hope. It was not impressive by galactic standards. It was a small frigate, built quickly using every piece of advanced technology Earth possessed. The journey to the neutral station called the Nexus took 3 weeks. When they arrived, Daniel stood at the viewport and stared in silence. The Nexus was the size of a small moon. Lights covered every surface, blinking in patterns that meant nothing to human eyes. Ships of every shape and size moved around it like fish swimming around a reef. Some were sleek and silver. Some were massive and rough, like floating mountains. Some seemed to be made of crystal or light or things that Daniel could not name. The Starbound Hope was guided to a docking port. Daniel straightened his uniform, took a deep breath, and led his team into the unknown. The council chamber was circular and vast. 12 elevated platforms surrounded a central floor, and each platform held a delegation from one of the founding species. Daniel had studied the files on each of them during the journey, but seeing them in person was different. The Vorsani were tall insectoids, with clicking mandibles and compound eyes that reflected the light. They held the rotating chair position this cycle. The Kelmari were beings made of living crystal, their bodies chiming softly as they moved. The Dreth were massive reptilians, covered in armored scales, each one nearly 3 meters tall. The Villani were pure thought, contained in mechanical shells that floated above their platform. There were others too. The serpentine Fenrith, the plant-like Verdani, the energy beings called the Lumineth. Each one ancient, each one powerful, each one watching the small group of humans standing on the central floor. Daniel waited to be acknowledged. The silence stretched for a long moment. Finally, High Counselor Zethrix of the Vorthani spoke. His voice was translated through a device that made it sound flat and mechanical. "You are the representatives of the species called human, from the planet designated Earth." "We are," Daniel replied. "You may present your petition for observer status." Daniel had practiced this speech 100 times. He spoke of Earth's history. He told them about humanity's struggles and achievements. He talked about their wars, but also their art, their music, their dreams. He spoke of their desire for peaceful coexistence among the stars. He talked about their willingness to share knowledge, to trade fairly, to learn from those who came before them. He spoke for nearly an hour. His voice stayed steady. His words were careful and respectful. When he finished, he stood straight and waited for a response. The chamber was silent for exactly 4 seconds. Then the Kelmari delegate began to laugh. It was a strange sound, like wind chimes caught in a storm. But there was no mistaking what it was. Others joined in. The Dreth let out rumbling chuckles that shook their platform. Even the Villani seemed to pulse with amusement, their mechanical shells vibrating. Daniel did not move. Sophie's jaw tightened behind him. Kevin looked down at his feet. "How charming," High Counselor Zethrix said when the laughter faded. "A species that has not even achieved faster than light travel on its own. wishes to sit among the stars. Your planet has been observed for some time, added Counselor Threnka of the Dreth. His voice was deep and slow, like stones grinding together. You spent a century killing each other over invisible lines drawn on your single world. You nearly destroyed yourselves with primitive nuclear devices. You poison your own air and water. And now you come here speaking of peace? Sophie stepped forward, anger flashing in her eyes. But Daniel placed a hand on her arm. She stopped. Perhaps the Kelmari delegate chimed, crystal body flashing with light. We could offer them a position in the collective labor pool. Their species seems well suited for mining operations. They are sturdy enough and clearly not intelligent enough for more complex work. More laughter filled the chamber. It echoed off the high ceiling and seemed to press down on the small human delegation. Like a weight, Daniel waited until the sound faded. His face showed nothing. May I ask a question? He said. Zetherix waved a limb in a gesture that seemed dismissive. You may. What are the terms for observer status? The High Counselor seemed surprised by the calm response. 10% of your planetary output as tribute for 100 of your standard years. Restrictions on weapons development. Mandatory inspections of all military and scientific facilities. Limitations on expansion beyond your home system. In exchange, you receive our protection from external threats and our guidance in matters of development. Daniel nodded slowly. He appeared to be thinking carefully about the offer. The council delegates watched with expressions that ranged from boredom to amusement. Then Daniel turned to his delegation. Sophie, Kevin, we are leaving. The laughter stopped instantly. Leaving? Zetherix's mandibles clicked rapidly. You have not yet accepted or rejected our terms. You're not accepting, Daniel said. His voice was still calm, still steady. And we are not rejecting. We are simply leaving. You cannot simply leave. There are protocols, procedures, forms that must be filed. We came here in good faith. We offered friendship. We were mocked. Daniel's eyes moved across the chamber, meeting the gaze of each delegate in turn. There is nothing left to discuss. He began walking toward the chamber exit. Sophie and Kevin followed without hesitation. Commander Harris, the Villani delegate, spoke for the first time. Its mechanical voice echoed through the chamber, cold and precise. You understand that without council protection, your species will be vulnerable. There are forces in this galaxy that do not respect the autonomy of unaligned worlds. You would be prey. Daniel stopped at the threshold. He turned back, and for the first time, the council saw something in his eyes that they had not noticed before. It was not anger. It was not fear. It was something quieter. Something that made several of the delegates shift uncomfortably on their platforms. Then I suppose, Daniel said softly, we will have to protect ourselves. The door closed behind them. The council chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then Counselor Threnka let out a snort. Foolish creatures. They will come crawling back within a decade. High Counselor Zetherix clicked his mandibles in agreement. Indeed. Let them learn the hard way what it means to stand alone in this galaxy. The matter was marked as closed. The humans were forgotten. That was their first mistake. 3 years passed in silence. The Galactic Council expected many things from the humans after that day. They expected desperate messages begging for another chance. They expected attempts to negotiate better terms. They expected perhaps a small conflict with one of the minor predator species that roamed the outer territories. Such a conflict would teach Earth its place and send them running back to the Council for protection. None of these things happened. Earth went quiet. The transit corridor that the Council had provided remained open, but no human vessels used it. Signals sent to Earth were answered briefly and politely. Always with the same recorded message, Earth appreciates your communication. We are not interested in further contact at this time. Thank you. Ambassador Kira Voss of the Villani Diplomatic Corps was the first to raise concerns at a council session. She was unusual for her kind, more curious about other species than most Villani, who generally considered organic life to be messy and inefficient. The humans have not attempted any external communication in 37 months, she reported. No trade inquiries to any species. No requests for information. No appeals for reconsideration. Nothing. They are sulking, Counselor Threnka said with a dismissive wave of his massive clawed hand. Primitive species often react this way to rejection. Their pride is wounded. They will return eventually, more humble than before. Perhaps High Counselor Zethrix agreed, his mandibles clicking softly. In the meantime, they are irrelevant. A single world in an unremarkable system. Let them sulk. But Kira Voss was not satisfied. Something about the human response did not fit the pattern she expected. Wounded pride usually led to angry messages, not complete silence. She authorized a reconnaissance probe to be sent to this Earth system under standard observation protocols. The probe never returned. A second probe was sent with enhanced shielding and better communication equipment. It transmitted data for approximately 4 minutes before going silent. In those 4 minutes, it captured images that would eventually reach the council chambers. The images showed Earth's moon. What had once been a barren gray rock now glittered with structures. Shipyards stretched across the surface. Factories pumped out smoke and light. Defense platforms hung in orbit, bristling with weapons that the probe's sensors could not identify. And ships. Hundreds of ships and designs that matched nothing in the Council's vast databases. They have been busy, Counselor Threnka admitted, studying the images. His usual dismissive tone was slightly less confident. But crude effort does not equal sophistication. Their technology remains generations behind ours. Then explain how they destroyed 2 of our probes, the Kelmari delegate said, crystal body flickering with agitation. Those probes were shielded against anything short of military-grade weapons. They should have been invisible to human sensors. No one had an answer. On Earth, Commander Daniel Harris had returned to a hero's welcome and then quietly stepped back from public life. He spent his days consulting with the new Global Defense Initiative, offering advice when asked, but letting younger minds lead the way. Dr. Lisa Palmer was one of those younger minds. She was 34 years old, with short brown hair and eyes that always seemed to be focused on something no one else could see. She worked 18-hour days in a research facility that had not existed 5 years ago. Her team had made breakthroughs that would have taken decades under normal circumstances. The new drive system is ready for testing, her assistant reported one morning. His name was Marcus Webb, a young engineer with more energy than sense. If the calculations are correct, we will have true faster-than-light capability within 6 months. Lisa nodded without looking up from her work. And the shield projectors? Ahead of schedule. The Council's probe gave us excellent data on their detection systems. We have already adapted our designs to counter them. Good, what about weapons? Marcus hesitated. That is Colonel Lane's department. She does not share information easily. Then go ask her nicely. Tell her I need the specifications for the new particle beam arrays. Across the planet, similar scenes played out in dozens of facilities. Colonel Patricia Lane coordinated the construction of Earth's defense grid from a bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. She was a hard woman with iron gray hair and a voice that made generals nervous. Under her command, Earth had transformed from a defenseless world into something else entirely. Diplomat Nicholas Gray worked on contingency plans for contact with non-Council species. His research suggested that the Council's 12 founding species were not the only civilizations in the galaxy. There were others, smaller and weaker, who lived under Council rule or in the spaces between their territory. These species might be interested in alternatives. Astrophysicist Dr. Samuel Burke mapped potential colony sites and systems that the Council had deemed worthless. Rocky worlds, ice moons, asteroid belts, places that no Council species wanted, but that humans could make livable with enough work. No one spoke of revenge. No one made angry speeches about the Council's mockery. They simply worked, quietly and efficiently, preparing for a future they would build themselves. When the Council's 3rd probe arrived in the Earth system, it was allowed to observe for exactly 72 hours. The humans wanted it to see what they had built. They wanted the Council to understand that Earth was no longer the helpless world it had been. Then a human vessel approached the probe. It was not destroyed. Instead, a simple message pod was attached to its hull. The pod contained a recording that would eventually play in the council chambers. The message showed Admiral Daniel Harris, as he was now called, sitting in a simple office. Behind him, through a window, the lights of the lunar shipyards glittered against the black sky. "To the Galactic Council," he said calmly. 3 years ago, we came to you seeking friendship. You offered us servitude. We declined." He paused, and something like a smile crossed his weathered face. "You called us primitive? You said we were not worthy of standing among the stars. Perhaps you were right. We were young. We had much to learn." The smile faded. "We have been learning. We have studied your technology from the probes you sent. We have built on what we knew and invented what we did not. We have prepared for a future where we stand alone because you made it clear that we had no other choice." He leaned forward slightly. "This is not a threat. We do not seek war with the Council. We do not seek revenge for the way we were treated. But we will not forget either. We remember your laughter. We remember your contempt, and we have used that memory as fuel." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the ships being built. "Earth is no longer asking for your approval. We are no longer interested in your observer status or your protection. We will make our own way among the stars. We will find our own allies. We will build our own future." He turned back to face the camera. "We remember. We prepare. And when the day comes that you need us, we will remember how you treated us when we needed you." The message ended. In the council chamber, the delegates sat in uncomfortable silence. The laughter that had filled this room 3 years ago was gone. Posturing Counselor Threnka said finally, "Primitive pride and empty words." But his voice lacked conviction. And when Kira Voss looked around the chamber, she saw something she had never seen before in the eyes of the 12 founding species. Doubt the humans had gone quiet. And in that quiet, they had become something new. Something the Council had not expected. Something that made even the oldest civilizations in the galaxy feel a small, unfamiliar chill. They had made a mistake laughing at Earth. They were only beginning to understand how large that mistake would prove to be. 8 years after Earth's delegation walked out of the council chamber, the Dreth Dominion found itself facing a problem it had not expected. The Harkon were not a council species. They lived beyond the borders of civilized space, moving from system to system like locusts. They were nomadic, aggressive, and completely uninterested in diplomacy. For centuries, they had raided the outer territories of council space, taking what they wanted and leaving destruction behind. The council's response had always been the same. When the Harkon became too bold, a combined fleet would push them back. The Harkon would retreat, lick their wounds, and stay quiet for a few decades. It was an old pattern, as predictable as the seasons, but this time something had changed. The Harkon fleet struck deep into Dreth territory, destroying 3 mining colonies and a military outpost before withdrawing. The attack was bolder than anything they had attempted in living memory. The Dreth demanded a council response. "We require a combined fleet action," Counselor Threnka declared at an emergency session. "The Harkon have violated our sovereign space. They must be punished severely." "The Harkon have violated Dreth space," High Counselor Zethryx corrected, his mandibles clicking with careful precision. "The council charter is clear. We are not obligated to respond to attacks on individual member territories unless the entire council is threatened. You would abandon us? After all, our years of service to this body? We would remind you of the rules you helped write. The council exists for mutual benefit, not to fight your wars for you." The argument continued for hours. Old alliances were invoked. Old debts were mentioned. In the end, the Dreth received promises of limited support. 2 council species would provide ships. The others would contribute funding. It was far less than Threnka had demanded. But it was something. The Dreth gathered their forces and prepared to push the Harkon back as they had done so many times before. What happened next surprised everyone. The Harkon fleet, emboldened by their initial success, pushed deeper into Dreth space. They expected to find scattered defenders and easy targets. They expected fear and confusion. Instead, they found a human trading vessel floating peacefully near an asteroid field. The ship was called the Quiet Venture. It was not a military vessel. It was a simple cargo hauler, designed for long journeys between systems. Its captain was a weathered merchant named Frank Morrison, a former military pilot who had found more profit in peaceful trade than in fighting. Frank had been running independent trade routes to non-council species for 4 years. He bought goods that council merchants ignored and sold them to buyers that council traders never visited. It was dangerous work, but it paid well. He had not expected to stumble into a war zone. The Harkon surrounded his vessel within minutes. 18 warships, each one bristling with weapons, formed a ring around the Quiet Venture. Their commander was a scarred warlord named Thresh, who had personally led the raids on the Dreth colonies. Human vessel. Thresh's voice crackled over the communication system. You have entered Harkon hunting grounds. Surrender your ship and cargo. Your crew will be sold. Resist, and you will be destroyed. Frank Morrison sat in his captain's chair and considered his options. He had a crew of 7. His ship carried no weapons that the Harkon could see. By every measure, he was hopelessly outmatched. He opened a communication channel. I am going to give you 1 chance to leave, he said calmly. The Harkon laughed. It was a harsh sound, full of contempt and cruel amusement. Th. Raish's scarred face appeared on the view screen, twisted with mockery. 1 chance? Little human, you are surrounded by 18 warships. What exactly do you think you can do? Frank Morrison sighed. It was the sigh of a man who had hoped to avoid paperwork. Something I really did not want to do today. The Quiet Venture was not what it appeared to be. Like most human vessels that traveled beyond Earth's territory, it carried hidden systems that activated only when needed. The cargo hauler's hull shifted, panels sliding aside to reveal weapons that gleamed with cold purpose. 12 minutes later, the Harkon fleet no longer existed. The Dreth patrol that arrived 3 hours later found the Quiet Venture floating peacefully among scattered debris. Fragments of Harkon ships drifted in every direction, some still glowing from the heat of their destruction. The human vessel appeared undamaged. The Dreth commander demanded an explanation. Frank Morrison shrugged, his weathered face showing no particular emotion. They shot first. I finished it. You destroyed 18 warships. Alone. With a cargo vessel, it has been modified. The Dreth commander stared at the human for a long moment. Then he looked at the debris field surrounding them. Then he looked back at the human. I will need to file a report. Sure. Do what you need to do. News of the encounter spread quickly through the galaxy. A single human trading vessel had destroyed an entire Harkon raiding fleet. The council dismissed it as exaggeration at first. Then they dismissed it as luck. Then they dismissed it as an isolated incident that meant nothing. But the Harkon did not return to Dreth space. And other species began to notice. The Fenari were a peaceful species who had lived under council protection for 3,000 years. Protection was perhaps too kind a word. They paid tribute to avoid conflict, surrendered portions of their territory when demanded, and accepted whatever terms the council offered. They had no military of their own and no hope of building one. They sent a quiet inquiry to Earth through channels that the council did not monitor. We have heard stories, the message said. Are they true? The response came from a human diplomat named Catherine Ellis. She was part of a new generation trained specifically for contact with alien species. She had patience, a gift for languages, and absolutely no tolerance for bullying. What stories have you heard? She asked. That your people walked away from the council. That you refused their terms. That you do not kneel. Those stories are true. We would like to talk. The conversation that followed was the first of many. Within a year, Earth had established trade relationships with 17 non-council species. The terms were unlike anything these species had experienced before. No tribute was demanded. No inspections were imposed. No territories were claimed. The agreements were simple. Fair exchange, mutual respect, and a standing offer of assistance to any who asked. Some of these species were weak. Some were poor. Some had nothing to offer except friendship. Earth accepted them all. The Council watched this development with growing unease. At another session, Ambassador Kira Voss raised the issue directly. The humans are building alliances outside our structure. They offer protection without demanding submission. Several minor species have already indicated interest in closer ties with Earth. Let them play at diplomacy, Counselor Threnka said. But his voice was less confident than before. The memory of the Harkin fleet, destroyed by a single human cargo ship, had affected him more than he wanted to admit. When they face a real threat, they will come crawling back to us. Kira Voss said nothing. But she noticed something important. The other delegates were quieter than usual. The laughter that had once filled this chamber whenever humans were mentioned was gone. The galaxy was beginning to wonder what the humans had been building during their years of silence. And more importantly, the galaxy was beginning to wonder what the humans planned to do with what they had built. The answer would come sooner than anyone expected. And when it came, it would change everything. 15 years after humanity walked out of the council chamber, the collective arrived. The collective was not a species. It was not a civilization in any normal sense. It was a machine intelligence, vast beyond imagination, that had slept in the dark spaces between galaxies for thousands of years. No one knew who had built it, or why. No one knew what had awakened it. All anyone knew was that it was hungry. The first warning came when 3 council worlds went silent in the same week. Communication arrays stopped responding. Ships sent to investigate never returned. Reconnaissance probes captured images that would give nightmares to anyone who saw them. Vast ships, each one the size of a small planet, hung in orbit around the silent worlds. They were not attacking in any normal sense. They were harvesting. Every resource on the planets below was being stripped away. Minerals, water, air, and the populations themselves were not being killed. They were being collected, their biological matter repurposed, into new machines to serve the collective's endless hunger. The council convened an emergency session. Fear filled the great chamber, thick enough to taste. Species that had not agreed on anything in centuries suddenly found common ground. We must respond with overwhelming force, High Counselor Zethrix declared. A combined fleet. Every ship we can gather. We will crush this threat before it spreads further. For the first time in recorded history, all 12 founding species agreed without argument. The combined fleet of the Galactic Council numbered over 10,000 vessels. It was the largest military force ever assembled. Dreadnoughts, carriers, destroyers, warships, from a dozen different species, each one representing thousands of years of technological development. The fleet met the collective at the Battle of Vareth Prime. The battle lasted. The Council fleet was destroyed. Not partially, not tactically, completely. Over 8,000 ships were torn apart. The collective suffered minimal losses and continued its advance without pause. Panic spread through council space like wildfire. Species that had not known fear for centuries now faced extinction. Emergency sessions devolved into blame and accusations. The Kelmari accused the Dreth of cowardice. The Dreth accused the Vorthani of incompetence. The alliance that had held the galaxy together for 10,000 years began to crack. Counselor Zethrix made a decision that would have been unthinkable a month earlier. He drafted a message to Earth. We request immediate consultation regarding the collective threat. All previous disputes are hereby suspended pending resolution of the current crisis. The Council formally requests Earth's assistance in this matter. The response came not from a politician or a general, but from a woman named Dr. Helen Torres, who now led Earth's Unified Council of Nations. Her message was brief. We will send a representative. The ship that arrived at the Nexus 3 days later was nothing like the modest frigate that had come 15 years ago. It was called the Determination, and it was beautiful in a way that made the Council delegates uncomfortable. Sleek lines, gleaming hull, an energy signature that briefly caused the station's sensors to malfunction. The man who stepped off the ship was Daniel Harris, now 63 years old. His hair had gone completely gray, and deep lines marked his face. But his eyes were the same as they had always been, calm, patient, and utterly unreadable. Sophie Grant walked beside him, equally aged, but equally sharp. Behind them came a new generation of diplomats and military officers. Men and women who had grown up knowing that Earth stood alone. The council chamber was fuller than it had been for their first visit. Not just the 12 founding species, but representatives from dozens of others. Many of them were species that had formed ties with Earth over the years. The Fenari, the Torith, the Vondrani. They stood apart from the council delegates. Watching with expressions that were hard to read, High Counselor Zethric spoke first. His mandibles clicked nervously, a sound that Daniel had learned to recognize as anxiety. Admiral Harris. "Thank you for responding to our request. Thank you for making it," Daniel replied. "I know that was not easy. The situation is desperate. The collective has consumed 11 worlds. Our fleet is shattered. We hope that Earth might be willing to contribute to a unified defense effort. Your technology is clearly advanced. Any assistance would be appreciated." Daniel walked to the center of the floor, the same spot where he had stood 15 years ago. The same spot where he had been laughed at and mocked. 15 years ago, he said, "We came to you with open hands. We asked for nothing but the chance to stand among you as equals. You laughed at us. You offered us slavery disguised as protection. And when we refused, you expected us to fail." He paused, his eyes moving across the chamber. "We did not fail. We worked. We built. We prepared. Not for revenge. We never wanted revenge. But we knew that someday something would come that threatened everyone. And we knew that when that day came, we would be ready." "Then you will help us?" Zethric asked. Hope and desperation mixed in his translated voice. Daniel's expression did not change. "We will help everyone. Not just the Council. Every species that wants to survive, whether they laughed at us or not. That is the difference between us. You built an empire based on hierarchy and tribute. We are going to build something different. Something based on choice. What terms do you require? We do not have terms. We have an offer. Stand with us and fight as HFY. LS. Or stand aside and hope for the best. We are not asking for payment. We are not asking for tribute. We are not asking anyone to kneel." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegate after delegate. "We are asking you to trust us, and we understand if you cannot. Trust is earned, not demanded. So watch what we do next. Then decide for yourselves." Admiral Harris turned and began walking back toward his ship. At the threshold, he paused and looked back. "The collective will reach the Kelmari homeworld in approximately 4 weeks. We will be there. Anyone who wants to join us is welcome." The door closed behind him. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted over each other. Accusations flew. Some demanded immediate alliance with Earth. Others called it a trap. Others simply sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had witnessed. But among the noise and confusion, Counselor Threnka sat quietly, his massive reptilian form still for the first time anyone could remember. He was thinking about a human trading vessel that had destroyed 18 Harkin warships. He was thinking about the confidence in Daniel Harris's eyes. He was thinking about what it might mean to stand beside such people instead of against them. For the first time in his long life, Threnka felt something he had never expected to feel toward a species, at once called primitive, respect. The Kelmari homeworld was 4 weeks away. The collective was coming, and the galaxy was about to learn what humanity had truly become during their long years of quiet. The collective fleet entered the Kelmari system expecting minimal resistance. The crystalline beings had already begun evacuation procedures. Their military forces were scattered and demoralized. Their homeworld lay open and waiting to be harvested like all the others. Instead, the collective found a wall of ships waiting for them. 147. Human vessels hung in formation around the Kelmari homeworld. They were joined by ships from the Fenari, the Torith, and 18 other species that had allied with Earth over the past decade. These were the forgotten species, the ones the Council had ignored or exploited. They had come because Earth had asked, and because Earth had never asked for anything in return for friendship. Behind them, hesitant but present, were the remnants of the Council fleet. The Dreth had come with everything they had left. The Vorthani had sent a squadron. Even the Kalmari, whose world hung in the balance, had gathered their few remaining warships. Admiral Daniel Harris stood on the bridge of the Determination, studying the approaching enemy on the tactical display. The collective ships were massive, dark shapes that seemed to swallow the light around them. There were over 400 of them. Captain Marcus Webb stood beside him. The young engineer had grown into a seasoned commander over the years. His hair was starting to gray at the temples, and his eyes held the weight of responsibility. "They outnumber us nearly 3-1, Marcus reported. "The Council fleet is hanging back. They are not certain we can win. Numbers are not everything. Our allies are ready. The Fenari squadron is in position. The Torith have deployed their fighters." Daniel nodded slowly. "What about our special weapon?" "Ready to deploy on your command." "Good. Open a channel to all ships." The communication system crackled to life. Daniel's voice reached every vessel in the fleet, human and alien alike. "This is Admiral Harris. 15 years ago, my species was laughed at. We were called primitive. We were told we did not belong among the stars. Today, we stand together with friends who believed in us when no one else did. Today, we fight for a world that is not our own, because that is who we choose to be." He paused, watching the collective ships grow larger on the display. "I will not promise you victory. I will not promise you survival. But I will promise you this. Whatever happens today, the galaxy will remember. They will remember that when darkness came, we did not run. We did not hide. We stood together and we fought. And if we fall as equals. Side by side, facing the void without fear." He took a breath. All ships engage. The Battle of Kelmari Prime lasted 19 hours. It was not a clean victory. Human ships were destroyed. The Fenari lost half their squadron in the first wave. The Torith fighters were decimated, protecting a breach in the defensive line. The collective adapted to every tactic, learned from every defeat, countered every strategy. But humanity had spent 15 years preparing for exactly this kind of fight. Every ship carried weapons designed specifically to exploit collective weaknesses that Earth scientists had spent years identifying. Every captain had trained for years against simulated collective tactics. Every crew member understood what was at stake and what they were fighting for. More importantly, humanity fought differently. The Council had always approached war as a matter of overwhelming force and rigid command structure. Orders came from above, and subordinates followed without question. Humans fought with flexibility and creativity. When a collective vessel tried to flank the formation, 3 human frigates moved to intercept without waiting for orders. When a section of the line began to collapse, reinforcements arrived before anyone requested them. The human fleet moved like a living thing, adapting and responding in ways that the collective's predictive algorithms could not anticipate. 12 hours into the battle, something changed. The Council fleet, which had been holding back, suddenly surged forward. Counselor Threnka himself led the Dreth contingent into the thickest fighting. This massive dreadnought absorbing damage that would have destroyed lesser ships. The Vorsani formed precise attack patterns that complemented the human assault. Even the Kalmari, their crystal ships fragile compared to others, threw themselves into the battle with desperate courage. Marcus asked. Watching the tactical display with wonder, Daniel watched a Dreth destroyer sacrifice itself to protect a damaged human cruiser. "They saw us bleeding for a world that is not ours. They saw us keeping our word." He shook his head slowly. "They finally understood." At the 16th hour, Admiral Harris gave the order to deploy the special weapon. It was not a bomb or a missile. It was a signal carefully crafted over years of research, designed to exploit the one weakness that all machine intelligences shared. The signal spread through the effective fleet like a virus. It did not destroy the enemy ships. It confused them. For exactly 17 minutes, the collective could not coordinate. Individual ships continued fighting, but the unified intelligence that made them so deadly was disrupted. 17 minutes was enough. The combined fleet struck with everything they had. Human vessels punched through the collective formation. Dreth dreadnoughts rammed enemy ships at point-blank range. Fenari bombers targeted the vulnerable core systems that the collective exposed in their confusion. When the signal faded and the collective regained coordination, their fleet had been reduced by half. And for the first time in their existence, they calculated that victory was no longer certain. The collective retreated. They were not destroyed. They were too vast to distribute it across the galaxy for a single battle to end them. But they were stopped. Their advance was broken, and the galaxy had learned that they could be beaten. In the aftermath, as rescue teams searched wreckage and medical ships treated the wounded, High Counselor Zethrix requested a private meeting with Admiral Harris. They met in a small conference room on the Nexus. Just the two of them could demand anything right now, Zethrix said. Tribute, territory, acknowledgement. We owe you our civilization. Daniel shook his head. We do not want anything you owe us. We want something you choose to give. And what is that? Partnership. Real partnership. Not the council as it was, with masters and servants. Something new. A community of equals, where every species has a voice and no one kneels. Zethrix was silent for a long moment. His compound eyes reflected the lights of the stars outside. You could have taken revenge. After everything we did to you, revenge does not build anything. It only tears things down. Daniel looked out the window at the ships being repaired, human and alien crews working side by side. 15 years ago, you laughed at us. You thought our pride was foolish, our hope was naive. Maybe you were right about some of that. We were young. We were scared. We did not know what we were doing. He turned back to face the High Counselor. But we did not let fear make us cruel. We did not let rejection make us bitter. We just went home and got to work. And when the time came, we did not ask who had hurt us. We asked who needed help. Why? After everything we did, why would you help us? Daniel smiled. It was a tired smile, but genuine, because that is who we are. That is who we choose to be. We are humans. We make mistakes. We fight among ourselves. We nearly destroyed our own world more than once. But we also build. We dream. We reach for something better, even when everyone tells us it is impossible. He extended his hand, an old human gesture. The council laughed at Earth, but we did not walk away in anger. We walked away in quiet, because we had work to do. Now the work is done, and we are offering our hand. The question is whether you are ready to take it. Zethrix looked at the offered hand for a long moment. He thought about the laughter in the council chamber 15 years ago. He thought about the fear and chaos of recent months. He thought about the human ships that had died protecting a world that was not theirs. Slowly, he extended one of his own limbs.